Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Yashodanandan Braj Jana Ranjan Yashodanandan Braj Jana Ranjan Yashodanandan Braj Jana Ranjan Jamuna Tira Banachari Jamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. So today I'll be reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text 5. Yagya danatapa karma natyagyam karmyam evatat yagyo danam chapaschaiva pavanani manishinam. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up. They must be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great souls. Purport. The yogis should perform acts for the advancement of human society. There are many purificatory processes for advancing a human being to spiritual life. The marriage ceremony, for example, is considered to be one of these sacrifices. It is called Vivaha Yagya. Should a sannyasi who is in the renounced order of life and who has given up his family relations encourage the marriage ceremony? The Lord indeed says here that any sacrifice which is meant for human welfare should never be given up. Vivaha Yagya, or the marriage ceremony, is meant to regulate the human mind so that it may become peaceful for spiritual advancement. For most men, this Vivaha Yagya should be encouraged even by persons in the renounced order of life. Sannyasis should never associate with women, but that does not mean that one who is in the lower stages of life, a young man, should not accept a wife in the marriage ceremony. All prescribed sacrifices are meant for achieving the Supreme Lord. Therefore, in the lower stages, they should not be given up. Similarly, charity for the purification of the heart is for the purification of the heart. If charity is given to suitable persons, as described previously, it leads one to advance spiritual life. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanajana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Open my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. Acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up. They must be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great souls. So what would life be without giving and charity? Can you imagine a world full of miserable people who are selfish, greedy, and they have nothing else better to do but to accumulate and stock, valuables for themselves? And this is actually one of the symptoms of Kali Yuga. And so the world would be full of selfish and self-centered people. And if you ever had a conversation with a materialistic person, it actually becomes very boring. They are always talking about me, my achievements, I've done this, and they always recognize themselves to be very great. And so the conversation becomes stale. Whereas if you talk to someone that's very humble, they ask questions, how are you, things like that. So there's a kind reciprocation. And by giving, it reveals the condition of our heart. If we give to others, it actually shows how far we are in our spiritual advancement. And you cannot give what you don't have. Just like on book distribution, a lot of people that I meet, they're very unhappy. And I ask them, are you happy? And they will flatly tell me, yes, I'm very happy. So then I ask them this question, what do you do for work? And they'll tell me, I do this. And when I tell them, would you work for free? 99% of the people, they say, no, I wouldn't. So if they didn't get paid for what they do, they're actually not happy. So they're in illusion. And when we give, it transforms our heart. It softens the heart and it purifies the heart. Because when we give, our hearts are transformed in the process. Just like when we give a gift to someone, naturally we feel very happy. Because that's our nature, is to render service. And Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of the Hare Krishna movement, he says that our dharma or our essence is to render service to somebody. Just like a wife renders service to the husband, a child renders service to the parents, and life goes on like that. And if you're working, you must render service to a boss. So we can't escape this. And Srila Prabhupada says if we don't want to serve anybody, we get a pet cat or a pet dog and we serve that. And we become menial servants to these dogs and cats. Just like Srila Prabhupada, he says that the dog is telling the owner, stay here, I'm going to pass through. And the human says, okay, sir. So after the dog does this business, we pick it up. So we have to render service. And so I started doing this when I go out on book distribution. After the garlands are taken off from our deities, they become prasadam. So I give flowers to the people that I meet. And actually, even if someone is having a bad day and I give them a flower, you can see their face change. They say, wow, thank you. And they appreciate it, and people become emotional sometimes. They start crying, they start saying, oh, thank you so much. Because when was the last time someone has given him or her a flower? And this idea of Valentine's Day, it's actually very pathetic. Once a year, you can finally show your loved one how much you care, right? Just once a year. It should be every day. And if we can't give anything, we can give our time, we can give our things like that. So it may not necessarily be something material. And I tell them that these flowers, they're real. Just like the other day, I saw these two Matajis. They were wearing these flower lei garlands, and it was made out of plastic. So I called them over. I said, hey, excuse me, I have a gift for you. So I took out my bag full of prasad, and I told her, I have a gift for you, and I would like you to have it. When I gave her the garland, she was so touched by it. Because, we don't have to go to Hawaii to get it. We get flowers done by nice devotees. They string the garlands. And the act of giving, it's natural to feel good after something is done for someone out of kindness, out of no material, you can say, return. And by simply witnessing generosity, you may be inspired to do something generous on your own. Just like when I was working before I moved into the temple, something as simple as throwing trash on the floor. People would just walk past it. But I took the time, it's not a very big deal, but I took the trash and I threw it in the trash can. And after that, I looked back and people were looking, trying to see if there's trash around. And Lord Krishna, he says in the Bhagavad Gita, whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. So we should always set a good example for others. And this doing good for others, there's a return policy. You do good, and good also comes back. Some people define that as karma. So, by giving to others, you pass along the feeling of gratitude. And how else will we be able to show affection and appreciation for one another? If we didn't sacrifice, if there was no charity, no penance. And in the Nectar of Instruction, Srila Rupa Goswami says there are 6 loving exchanges between devotees. You offer gifts in charity and you accept charitable gifts. You reveal one's mind in confidence and then you inquire confidentially. You accept prasadam and then you offer prasadam. So these are the 6 symptoms of love shared by one devotee to another. Just like, sometimes it's the devotees or the brahmachari's birthday here. And, sometimes we do nice things. If we don't have a gift to give, we give letters, thank you for everything, thank you for your services. And the other person actually, they feel inspired to want to share the same thing. And life is not meant to be lived for one's own enjoyment, pleasure, and advancement in material life. That's not what human life is about. And if one lives for oneself, he lives a life in vain. So, like I mentioned before, a materialistic person, he always says, I did this, I am this, I'm the CEO, I completed this, I got a PhD. And my spiritual teacher, His Holiness Badrinarayan Swami, he says PhD stands for permanent head damage. Because they go to school, and they become so puffed up. So it's very hard to get to them. And you lose interest in the conversation.
There are at least 3 PhDs in this audience.
I'm sorry, but I'm talking about materialistic PhDs. You guys are all devotees, so it doesn't pertain to you. Please excuse me. And if one lives for others' sake, for the sake of upliftment for others, for the betterment of the world, then it is a life of value, right? So human being is about understanding something higher in life and knowing the purpose of existence. Just like there are certain questions that we should ask ourselves. Who am I? What is the purpose of life? Why is there suffering in the world? And what is the solution to the problems of life? And not many people actually ask these questions. In the back of our book called The Journey of Self-Discovery, there's a first line. It says, at some point, a fortunate soul will ask these questions. A fortunate soul. So how many people are interested in getting out of this cycle of birth and death? They don't see the value of it. And this human form of life is actually a gift from Krishna, God's gift. And it's a very precious gift. And Srila Prabhupada, he says that the special property of humans is that they are able to engage in spiritual life. Therefore, without spiritual life, humans are on the level of animals. Just like earlier, we mentioned marriages. You don't see marriages in the animal kingdom. They mate with anyone, and Srila Prabhupada, he uses the example of a hog. A hog will mate with its mother, sister, or daughter. They don't discriminate. Whereas the human beings, the marriage ceremony, it's nowadays, people have boyfriend and girlfriends. And but the marriage ceremony, it protects the husband and the woman from committing, bad acts. And so this human form of life is awarded to us after transmigrating through all the species of life. And according to the Puranas, there are 8,400,000 species of life. There are 900,000 species in the water. Fishes, dolphins, whales, there's so much. And there are 2 million species that are non-moving, such as trees, plants, things like that. And there are 1,100,000 species of insects, reptiles. If you go to the zoo, there's, maybe like just 100. And in the bird species, there's over 1 million species of birds. And there are 3 million varieties of animals. Two-legged animals are considered the human beings. And finally, there are 400,000 that are considered human species. And even among these 400,000, there's civilized human beings. They actually have culture. So the human form of life is very valuable. It is easily obtained, but it is very rare to obtain. And Prahlad Maharaj in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he describes that the human body is most rarely achieved. But although temporary like other bodies, it is meaningful because in human life, one can perform devotional service. Even a slight amount of sincere devotional service can give one complete perfection. The animals, they're not interested in devotional life. They're interested in 4 things: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. They're not interested in understanding who is God, what is my relationship with God, and what is my relationship with the world. They're simply going by instincts. And it is easily obtained because it is given automatically by natural evolution without any effort. And it's rare because once we lose it, it will take a long time again to reach a human body, a human form. The other day I was distributing books and I met this couple. The lady, she was very nice. She was very inquisitive about spiritual life, to understand karma, reincarnation, things like that. But the man, he wasn't so interested. So I was telling him that the consciousness that one is in at the time of death, that will determine his next life. And so he was saying, "Oh, I don't mind being a dog." And I looked at him and I said, "Are you serious?" And he said, "Yeah." He was guessing he's going to take birth as a dog in America. Because, here in America, they worship dogs. But I told him, you may be born as a dog in China, where they eat dogs. Or in the Philippines, where, I came from, and they don't put too much care for dogs. They leave them, to sleep outside. They don't buy $100 clothes for animals. They don't do that. Insurance also. Before I moved into the temple, there was this TV show. It was about dogs getting married. And people would spend hundreds and thousands on these dog marriages. And so it was very regretful, actually, to finally get this human birth, and we want to become dogs in our next life. That's called unfortunate. And an insect cannot be promoted to a human body immediately. It must travel through the 8,400,000 species. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, it describes that the human body is compared to a perfectly constructed boat. And the spiritual master is the captain. And the favorable winds are the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. And it's like when someone gives you a $1 billion bill, let's say there is a $1 billion bill, and you throw it away or you waste it. See, and some people, they lack knowledge, and they do not utilize this human form of life properly. There are 4 kinds of charity. There's tamasic dan, or charity in the mode of ignorance. And this is performed at an improper time, at the wrong place, to an unworthy person, like a drunkard or a gambler. You may give them some money, but they spend it on something sinful. Therefore, the person that gives that charity, they get implicated in this vicious cycle of karma. And Rajasic Dan is charity in the mode of passion, and is performed to get something in return, like a business deal, for name and fame, or in a grudging mood. Sometimes when I talk to family members, one person is interested, and the other person, they'll put something on the table, like $1, and then they'll call their wife, hey, I gave him something, let's go. And I tell them these books are very important, They help you to understand the real goal in life, which is to return to our constitutional position as eternal servants of Krishna. Like I mentioned, we're going to be serving someone or something. So we have the books to convince people. And there's Satvik Dan, or charity in the mode of goodness. And this is performed as a duty and at the proper time, right place to a worthy person with no expectation of material return. Just like sometimes people give charity to churches, mosques, temples, things like that. And then there is charity in the mode of pure goodness. And this is performed only to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So yeah. And Srila Prabhupada, he says that the best form of charity is to distribute these transcendental literature. Just like when I go on book distribution, I ask people, what do you do? And they'll tell me, I'm this, I'm that, I'm that. And when I ask for a donation, guess how much they'll give me? $1. $1. And they're talking so, you can say proudly that I'm this, I'm that. But when we ask them for a donation, they're very selfish. And they're willing to spend $10, $15 on a cup of coffee. And so we are trying to convince people to give back to Krishna. Just like, Srila Prabhupada has a nice sense of humor. He tells people, you're a thief. You're stealing from God's property, but you don't know it. And so charity is one of the best ways to repay our debts to the Supreme Lord. And charity, like I mentioned, it should never be given up. We can give charity in some form. We can give our time. We can give whatever ability we have, we can serve Krishna. And it's not just giving in donation. We can cook for Krishna. We can distribute books about Krishna. There's so many different ways. And I would like to end by this story. So there was a king, and this king needed a crow, a black crow. And in his kingdom, they were very rare to find a crow. So they were looking and looking, and finally they saw a blind man petting a black crow. So they said, "Sir, we need to have that crow." And the blind man said, "Why? This crow is insignificant, So what he did was he threw this crow out of his hands and it flew away. So the guards, the soldiers, they were thinking, "You're so foolish. Why did you do that?" So the blind man, he said, "I can always get a black crow. All I have to do is clap." So the soldiers were watching him. He kept clapping and clapping and clapping, but nothing happened. The crow never came back. So similarly, this human form of life is like that black crow. We're given an opportunity to understand who we are, but it's very rare, like in the beginning, like I said. So we should utilize this human form of life nicely. And Krishna says, Sarva Dharma Prityaja Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. So whatever dharma we have concocted, created, we should give that up. And we surrender to Krishna, and He protects us. Okay, that's all. Is there any comments or questions?
I think Guruji Prabhu should change the definition of PhD to permanent Hari devotee.
I'll tell him that. So yeah. I think we'll have Tulsi Puja next. So if we can stand up and put our mats back. Thank you for your time and attention. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.